Welcome to Rage Against the Mainstream, your full spectrum source for all things music, insight, and opinion. Today's date is August 23rd, 2021. My name is Bill, and I'm joined here today with Steve.
Yo.
So what's up, buddy? How you feeling today?
Good day, man. It's a little soupy out there weather-wise.
Yeah.
Muggy. However, on a personal note, I know a guy. Got my car fixed. Very excited.
Yeah.
Very excited. That's my most new thing. For interesting, I did want to say something because I want to get this out of the way because I'm sick of marketing for this album. But the whole Kanye West Donda album thing has been like irking the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
Not even like a huge newer Kanye fan. Like even his modern songs, like I haven't been a fan of, but I was really excited for this album. Dude's a marketing genius. But it is funny because I'll use Wikipedia to figure out release dates for albums, and watching that Wikipedia page consistently change on like tentative dates, it's gonna be released, and it's just constantly changing. Meanwhile, the Atlanta Falcons are starting to play preseason games in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and Kanye's still living there apparently, like trying to finish this. Dude, the whole situation is wild. But what that made me think of, because I recently discovered Nas released an album called King's Disease 2. It's a follow-up to King's Disease that he released in 2020. Okay. He also released an expanded edition of It Was Written, an album that was released prior in the same year. He released the expanded edition in July. He dropped the new album in August. Oh, okay. And like this is why with people like Kanye who thrive more on his image as opposed to his talents, that bother me. Because Nas is still good, man. Like, this King's Disease 2 album, it charted. It's very good. Yeah. Got great collaborations. There's a really good song there with Eminem, too, by the way. And I listened to it immediately, and it just reminded me, like, most new music I listen to is basically by artists that have been around. Since like the 80s, the 90s that are dropping.
Well, there's not really much else.
That's what I'm saying. Like artists that come out like recent, new, and exciting, it's very diamond. Like it's hard to find. Yeah. It's very hard to find. It's like straight diamond in the rough if you're a modern artist today that you can produce a level of work that these older artists consistently put out. And then that's why I thought about Kanye because, like, bro, you're good. You know, you are a good rapper, but to do what he's been doing with this album and just being so secretive about it and being so wishy-washy about it, but you have guys out there that are more established in the game like Nas that just drop music and good music at that. Like, yeah, fucking. So I'm gonna tell you now, if you haven't listened to that album, I absolutely highly recommend that. It's not gonna be my recommendation this week, but I highly, definitely recommend you listen.
I'm gonna
to
have to check it out.
It's good, dude.
Yeah,
it's very good.
Nice.
What about you?
Well, I haven't really come across anything new in music. Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of music related. Well, Paramount Plus, they, you know, MTV's on there as well. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but on MTV commercials now, they kind of have like the Dire Straits thing in the, like the opening of the commercial where it's like MTV Productions and it's, I want my MTV. I'm like, oh my
like
God.
The old school,
like it started, like I think there's something happening here. But on Paramount Plus, they started doing behind the music again because MTV, you know, dissolved VH1, so now they're the ones doing it. They had like Busta Rhymes was one. I didn't watch it because the one that caught my eye was Huey Lewis in the News. For those of you that don't know, I enjoy Huey Lewis in the News on a pretty decent level. I think
very good artist.
They're like one of those bands, dude, that like granted they had those hits and they were mega huge, but I feel like they kind of get lost in like the whole like talk about like really good bands.
Of course.
Like there's just more to them
They're
than
almost
Back
like
to the Future.
I was gonna say they're almost like a like if you put in context like Boys to Men and like those iconic group names like Parliament Funk and stuff like that. Huey Lewis and the News is like people know of them, but because of the hits, like that's one of those artists like you really have to like dive into.
Yeah.
Like they're all
And
just a very good artist.
they have such like a diverse background and everything that they do. And, you know, like Huey Lewis in the News, like Huey Lewis himself was in like his like mid 30s by the time they had actually became super successful. So, you know, that in itself is like just insane. And everything they did was like pretty much on their own. They forged their own path. You know, the tons of record labels had declined them. And it wasn't until like, you know, 20 years into their career, they came out with fucking Sports. Mm-hmm. It's just incredible, their story. But, it focuses more on Huey Lewis than Huey Lewis in the News.
Yeah.
And turns out like he's got like vertigo and stuff like super bad, like tinnitus. Like at this point in his career, he's not even doing music anymore because he can't hear.
Yeah.
He lost hearing in his right ear completely. His left ear was starting to go, and then he said they were on stage back in 2018, and they were playing or whatever, and he thought like the dude's bass amp was fucked up. Like he like looked at him like, what the fuck is going on? But little did he know it's because his hearing was just fucking wiped. You know, he said he can't sing on key anymore because he can't hear, and it's really sad because there's still a lot of talent still left in there, and it just goes in. They also talk about the process of recording their newest album called Weather that I haven't heard, but it's actually it's going to be the last Huey Lewis album.
So this is a new behind
this
the
is
music
from this year.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so
I remember that, like even what was it, like Headbangers Ball. I remember all like the interview sessions and stuff. Like there was so much cool shit on MTV back in the day, man. That just. Yeah, that's great that they fucking even did that, though.
Well, I feel like it's super fitting, too, because Huey Lewis was like one of the first VJs on MTV.
Yeah.
Like, they actually show it, like, you know, like, welcome to MTV, I'm Huey Lewis. And it's just like, oh, shit, it's like coming full circle again. And, like, it's got me super excited of the fact they're starting to use the Dire Straits thing on the MTV commercials.
Very classic.
It makes me think.
Does it bring a logo in, too, like how it used to?
Yeah, it brings,
like that real, like, 80s,
it's
early
the picture
90s.
of, like, the MTV Movie Awards, like astronaut guy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're moving in the right direction.
Well, because you think about all the vintage shit that they've brought back.
Yeah.
Dude, you know how many fucking hipster kids would just get on board with the idea of MTV if it was run like how it was run when we were
Are you kidding? It would be amazing.
All the MTV Unplugs and all that stuff back, dude.
It would be good.
Christ.
It would be really good.
Because we're over that. Like when they brought on like 16 and Pregnant and all those fucking shows, like that was
14
cool.
and
It was
Knocked Up.
Yeah, fucking Super Sweet 16 and bullshit. Like, dude, like when they brought that
17 and Divorced.
Yeah. 18 and strung out on narcotics.
Yeah.
But all that stuff was cool because of like shock value. Like reality TV wasn't a thing, so it was something new as opposed to like, oh, I get to watch these fake dramas. Now I get to look into the lives of real people, and that to me is more exciting. But that's like worn off. Like, I don't know where, like, and this may be just me personally, but reality TV nowadays even feels so scripted and watered down, and the whole market for it. It's just like podcasting, to be honest with you.
And I feel like what was the beginning of all that was Jersey Shore. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Jersey Shore, but
dude, that was a phenomenon.
Too.
That was a phenomenon in the early days, you know what I mean? But, and then that's the thing, I think if they went back to that old school style of, because, I mean, music videos are still a thing.
They still
But I can tell
them.
you right now, I don't really watch them unless I'm YouTubing a song specifically, and the first option is like official music video. But I don't go out of my way to check them, and I don't really have many television shows that just constantly stream.
Well, that's the thing, because there is none.
I know, it's disturbing.
I mean, is Fuse even still?
They still have things like that, but it's like top 100. It's like a very specific thing. They don't just like consistently play like newer videos and like have a format to it.
I remember Fuse used to be super badass when they first came out.
Dude, like, remember they brought it back like a retro Nickelodeon channel where it was playing like Doug and Hey Arnold.
Wasn't it like Nickelodeon Splat or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Even all that stuff. Even like Legends of the Hidden Temple is coming back and shit like that. Why don't they make like an MTV retro? Imagine turning it on and just seeing Alice in Chains Unplugged like playing for an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Like that's the episode.
Or like even just reruns of that shit. You know, like I just said with the Huey Lewis being the VJ thing, just replay it.
Yes.
Like, are you kidding me?
And just also mesh in new shit to expose people to newer music. Fuck it. Mm-hmm. So much.
That's the thing. They probably don't feel like there's any money.
MTV needs to hire us as what's the guy's name from Chrysler? As his marketing manager.
Lee Iacocca.
Yeah. That's what we need to be. We need to get on board with
I would like to be
MTV.
more like the Carol Shelby of it.
We should.
Like, you want us to, update your systems? Not a problem. You call the right guy.
Yeah.
My name's Kyle Shelby, and I like to go fast.
Listen.
I build fast cars.
Listen, they want you to play this Black Keys video, but I'm going to tell them, it's your show. You do what you want. You play that Cannibal Corpse album if you want to. I don't care if children are watching.
Well, I do remember that. That was the first place I saw a Cannibal Corpse video was on Headbangers
That's what I'm saying, dude. I remember like the Philosopher with Death, was shown on there. That was a big deal. Like even Beavis and Butthead, where they would like incorporate music videos into their show to get you like exposure for certain artists and stuff. I mean, dude, there was just so much growth on there and opportunity. But I mean, reality TV, fucking. Like Rob Dyrdek and fucking what the hell's the name of that show? Ridiculousness. That's like that's all you're seeing now.
You have to remember, you had like Robin Big, then you had Fantasy Factory, then you had Ridiculousness. I think he's got another show too.
The days of just fucking watching music videos and then Jackass would be peppered in.
Yeah.
Or Viva La Bam would be peppered in.
And then Beavis and Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead would be peppered. Dude, fuck, man.
Those were the good old days.
We're like old bigots now.
Yeah, we're
like,
that old.
We are those people. We're like my father. Like, what happened to just Levi's and Led Zeppelin?
I remember back when MTV used to play Van Halen videos all the time.
Before, you used to take a girlfriend down to the soda fountain. Now everyone's licking each other's buttholes and getting STDs in the mouth. Like, yeah, seriously, like, fucking, we're at that age now. I'm fucking sick of these kids.
So, on a real note, though, MTV, if you want some ideas on how to rejuvenate your system that was once tried and true.
We offer free consultation.
Yeah, well, free consultations, fucking whatever. You can find us on social medias. Listen to the rest of the show.
Yes.
So I feel like that became like a mini topic of its own.
That'll probably branch into something further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, that was my new and interesting.
August 23rd, 1963. In the UK, the Beatles released She Loves You, which becomes the best-selling UK single of all time, a record that isn't broken until 1977, when, of course, Paul McCartney releases Mall of Kintyre.
I actually don't even know that song.
Neither do I.
Yeah, I would love to come up with something smart-ass to say about it, but I literally don't even know anything to
I can say,
about it.
well, I mean, She Loves You is a good song. But this is the thing with the Beatles, man. We talk about this all the time. Like, I'll hate on them just for the repetitiveness and this just the very, like we talked even with Nirvana in context of just perfect storm for the opportunity to become as successful as they did. Mm-hmm. But they're good. Like, the Beatles put out good music. For me, though, to have them on the pedestal that they are on, I'm taking the Stones over them any day.
I'd take the Beach Boys over the Beatles.
I would take the Beach Boys over the Beatles, too. I would take Aerosmith even over the Beatles. Any of those, like, up-and-coming rock acts that get put into the realm of, like, what the Beatles ultimately created. Yeah. I really just don't see the Beatles... Like, even Cream. Like, Cream really established that whole genre of classic rock to the psychedelic sound and everything else in between. And I would honestly take one Cream album before any Beatles album.
Yeah, and, like, going back to the Beach Boys versus the Beatles thing, like, they were literally competitors. And I feel like the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson in particular was just, like, light years ahead.
And I don't know why that happened, because, like, Pet Sounds I would take before Sgt. Pepper, before 100%. Revolver. 100%. I don't know where that shadow came over, I guess, because they were, I think the Beatles were, like, just, like, a smidge sooner. Yeah.
And, which is fine and all, but there's no denying.
But that's
the Beach Boys don't get nearly the accolades.
This is when you think about the terms of with Nirvana, because Nirvana like gets put in the same perspective as the Beatles in like the time that they came and what they revolutionized with music, and that's how. But think about the bands that were before them in the same context as the Beach Boys, like Sonic Youth. was already, like, they were opening for Sonic Youth by the time Nevermind came out.
Yeah.
You know,
The replacements.
Pearl Jam dropped 10 before, you know, Nirvana really hit the map. Facelift came out in 90.
But, like, I even feel like, obviously I don't want to get on a giant Alice in Chains thing, but I feel like it's unfair to kind of, like, loop in Alice in Chains and Nirvana in the same thing. Like, granted, it was the same area and time, but I feel like Alice in Chains had, like, more of a metal approach, which ultimately made it better for me.
I mean, you even had Green River, Mudhoney, I mean, Mother Love Bone, Post Danger Wood, Tad. You had so many other artists that were, like, Melvins. They were already really established in that scene. It's just
Soundgarden.
Weird to think that even if the Beatles came a little bit before, that they maintained, even though there was better artists coming after. Because that's basically what Nirvana was. Mm-hmm. Nirvana just took everything that was already blueprinted and, like, you know what I mean? It became like the spearhead for the rest of the genre.
Signed, sealed, delivered.
Yep.
1970, Lou Reed plays his last gig with the Velvet Underground at the Club Max's, Kansas City in New York. His father brings him home to Long Island and puts him to work in his accounting firm, where he stays for 2 years before signing a solo deal.
I honestly, there's not a single thing by Lou Reed solo-wise that I could even compare to his stint in the Velvet Underground.
Lulu was amazing. I don't care what anybody says.
It was interesting.
It was super interesting.
Super interesting. But, dude, I mean, it's funny because the Velvet Underground, I listened to the Velvet Underground and Nico in its entirety at least once a month at some point. Like, it's just that good of an album. And everything that was critiqued about it for why it was bad is like the reason I love it. All the songs are just extremely dark and it's about drugs and violence, and I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what I want to listen to it for. It's like depressing as fuck, but it's like happy at the same time. But Lou Reed's solo career, man, I wasn't a huge fan. Transformer was pretty good. But
I was never even really that big of a fan of the Velvet Underground, believe it or not.
Yeah,
well, I don't think it's that hard to believe, but
yeah. It's a very specific taste.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing because they also get held up there in the late 60s of being like, that album in particular being reputable as one of like the greatest albums of all time. Mm-hmm. Put next to like Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's and according to the Beatles with all their shit. And it's funny because it's such a totally different sound. This is why I always struggle with like, why are the Beatles looked at as like this be-all, end-all, iconic, like, that's the Godfather movie of music.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the reason why the Beatles get such a high praise or whatever is because they basically streamlined the process.
It sucks.
You know what I mean? It's just like anything. Great. It's like a freeze-dried coffee or fucking whatever. You know, it's just like, it's good. They have
a million other brands of it. Some flavors are way better, but this is the one.
I'm more of a breakfast blend from the donut shop fucking breakfast blend.
Yeah, donut shop is great.
Yep.
I'll even do Green Mountain.
Yeah.
From time to time.
I just buy whatever's cheap at Walmart.
Absolutely.
Honestly.
8 o'clock on sale. Yeah. That's a great brand too.
I buy whatever's cheap at Walmart.
I'm surprised you're not wearing a flannel while you said that.
Yeah.
1987, at a 20th anniversary Summer of Love celebration concert in Cavaleras County Fairgrounds in Angel Camp, California, featuring the Grateful Dead, a man who escaped from a drug treatment facility shoots a policeman and then shot dead. Yeah, that sounds about right for a Grateful Dead show.
Yeah, I mean,
especially
I don't know,
in the 80s.
Yeah.
In the 80s. Grateful, I mean, that wouldn't be shocking to me, to be honest.
I would expect this more like a Guns N' Roses show.
Yeah, but then I would also expect more of like arguing anarchist type violence as opposed to a strange individual showing through. Like, that's just like, because I can imagine all the people that are just calmly there and they just see that and they're like, whoa, that doesn't look good at all. Oh no, and then he oh no, like, you know what I mean?
Oh man,
like it's a very
see that?
Yeah, it's like a very isolated incident in the midst of this like peaceful sounding concert. Yeah,
listen, man,
very 80s Grateful Dead era.
A few years later, here
we have stuttering problems here at Rage Against the Machine. Junior?
In 1993, testifying in court against his former Guns N' Roses bandmate Steven Adler, Duff McKagan is asked about the spaghetti incident, referring to a time when Adler may or may not have eaten McKagan's leftover pasta. The band finds this hilarious and names their next album The Spaghetti Incident. The story behind this is actually way cooler than the album itself.
Yeah. Those covers on there just like the one I can get behind. I mean, even the Johnny Thunders cover of You Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory is pretty good. The Dead Boys cover of Ain't It Fun is okay. But at this point in Guns N' Roses' career, it was just...
Well, I believe it was in there behind the music or something like that, or maybe I read it. They said their cover, like it was the editor-in-chief of Rolling Stone. Yes, it was behind the music. He was referring to the Devil Knows My Name.
Yeah.
The cover.
Yeah.
He said that is the epitome of a band on the verge of breaking up. Yeah. Is that cover.
Yeah.
And like I never listened to it at that point. Then I did. And I was like, yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that whole album was just... Because I like cover albums. Like when a band does that, like Slayer's Undisputed Attitude.
Children of Bone and Skeletons in the Closet.
Great
that
fucking...
was a good one.
Yeah, good fucking albums, man.
Van Halen's Diver Down.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
One of the greatest cover albums of all time.
Is there something below this?
Yeah, it's something. Yeah, actually.
Okay. And wrapping up here on 2014, the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack, an awesome mix of 70s hits, goes #1 in America, where it stays for 2 weeks.
Not surprising.
Well, this was what was cool about that movie, because I remember even in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, that opening scene, I believe it's The Chain by Fleetwood Mac that opens that scene. Or
Guardians 2.
Yeah, Guardians 2. Guardians 2 I actually saw.
Guardians 1 is Redbone.
Okay, yeah. So that's what I really dig about that movie, because
the soundtrack's awesome.
That's what I'm saying, but also when it hits #1, it's great, because I can be that old person that sees like the kid being like, hearing me listen to Fleetwood Mac, be like, oh, that's that song from a TikTok video I saw.
Yeah.
And it'll piss me off at first, but it's good that people are getting into the music
at least
somehow.
It's there.
Because when we talk back to the whole MTV thing, the accessibility of how you're able to find your music, it's not so good, because you're really limited now in word of mouth.
Yeah.
You're very limited to your friends saying, check this out, or what's being popular and streamed on people using it for a TikTok video, or, the artists that people talk about, which is mostly like Cardi B and shit like that, Kanye West. You don't really get the opportunity where, unless their parents were getting them into it, just blindly find even a band to the stature of Fleetwood Mac, just blindly finding them.
Yeah.
It's not as easy, which is a shame. But that's why, I always dug both the soundtracks in both those movies.
They're awesome.
Very good.
It also is kind of annoying, though, too, because Star-Lord is a character. I feel like he would be more like into like the new wave of British heavy metal, or maybe like the beginnings of thrash and stuff like that. He just seems like that kind of guy to me. But then again, his mom was really influential with his music choices. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like it would be fitting if Star-Lord on his, his fucking mixtapes were to have some like Motley Crue or Judas Priest.
Well, let's be fair.
Van Halen.
Because if you were that character, you'd probably be listening to like Tell Me Why by the Backstreet Boys.
I want it that way.
And nobody would understand that. They would probably say the same thing about you if you were the character. I look at him and I really thought he'd be listening to more like grindcore, or, like Eaten Back to Life era Cannibal Corpse. Yeah. I wasn't really expecting NSYNC to be popping up on his playlists from time to time.
But you do know what I mean, though.
Of course.
Right?
No, I know exactly what you mean.
Like, don't get me wrong. I love the soundtrack. I love both soundtracks. They're fucking great. However, I do feel like there's no way that him being like a 10 to 12-year-old in the 80s.
Yes.
He wasn't listening to Led Zeppelin or Aerosmith.
Yes.
I'm not saying that the music that's in there doesn't fit, but I'm saying,
That reminds me, too, because I thought, I think that's, the important thing about movies is where you really need to develop just, modern context.
Yeah.
Because, even with this, one meme I saw about, this guy finding out Harry Potter took place in, the mid-90s. He's
Yeah.
like, which I find it hard to believe because at never at any point in that movie did it say, damn, the Chicago Bulls are having a hell of a run. You know what I mean? Like, that's the same thing. Like, I think like if directors paid a little more attention to like the small details and context, like it makes that shit so much more iconic.
That's the thing, that they're probably just like, oh, well, you know, his mom influences music decisions.
Yeah, but still, as a teenager, like in that era, you're gonna find
you would have found Led Zeppelin or
Black
Black
my
Sabbath.
dad got me into fucking classic rock and shit. But if I was a teenager in the '80s, you can best believe I would be at Black Flag concerts and the Misfits and shit. You know what I mean?
But regardless, it's a very good compilation, mixtape, album.
If you need
soundtrack.
marketing ideas for your next movies, Marvel. Like I said, we're
Well, that's
free
the thing, too.
concept
You know,
and shit.
I feel like they really missed the ball with Captain Marvel. I mean, granted, she was wearing a Nine Inch Nails shirt, but they could have had, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that era, but
Like,
that
It
was a
Ain't
shame.
Like That or something, like in one of the scenes.
Yeah.
Well, then again, she was wearing a Guns N' Roses shirt, too. And one of the pictures, she was dressed like Axl Rose for Halloween. So, I mean, I guess it
Close
works.
enough, yeah.
It works, but
We're a little being too scrutinized on the whole situation.
if you can't tell, we're really passionate about this kind of stuff.
We take extreme dedication into our work. Speaking of our work,
We could be outside consultants for movies and
we could do
Television.
anything. We could be the president at this point. Fuck it.
pretty much.
So what I wanted to say is speaking of like the MTV thing and like being able to like kind of renew a brand but make it original. I was talking to someone, and this is even in particular with like new music and bands coming out nowadays that give you kind of like a semblance of a hope for a better future of music, but without just redoing what's already been done. The particular band, and I'm sure most people are familiar with them, are Greta Van Fleet. And this got me to really thinking about, there is always that argument where people are like, we want music that sounded like this era. We miss music that sounded like this era. But then you get a band like Greta Van Fleet, which is literally almost like a Led Zeppelin cover band, is just making original tunes.
Yeah.
Like, it's basically what it sounds like on paper. I honestly heard a song by them. I thought it was an unreleased track by Led Zeppelin the
That
very
was my
first
first.
time. Yes.
That was my first thing, my first forte into them.
And the argument against that is like people are like, oh, they're a ripoff of Led Zeppelin, they're a ripoff of Led Zeppelin. And then the back argument is saying, well, you're getting music that sounds quite familiar and this is what people want, yet you hate on it when it happens. And this is where I started to think, like, there's a very fine line difference in not just kind of revitalizing a genre, but then you hit a point where you're just regurgitating something that's already been done completely.
Yep.
For instance, going to the Greta Van Fleet situation, branching off of that to say like what their comparison is to Led Zeppelin. The arguments of that, you won't believe it, dude. Trust me. It's you know what I mean? It's like peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
They work great together, but they're totally different apparently. So with the Led Zeppelin thing, everyone hated on Led Zeppelin was saying we ripped off blues bands. They ripped off blues bands. They basically did everything blues bands did. However, if I listen to artists like Howlin' Wolf and like all the true blues artists that went that specific direction, Led Zeppelin just took the ideas and blueprints and created an original act based on the influences. Same thing with all the bands that developed from like Black Sabbath, the whole doom metal scene.
Yep.
You very much hear Black Sabbath influence and shit, but you're not hearing Black Sabbath.
Yeah, you know, you get bands like Red Fang and Mastodon,
Green Lung.
Green Lung,
Yeah.
Acid Witch, like all those bands. Like they you can tell that that's where that shit came from.
Yes.
And they took it their own. I was actually explaining it to my wife when I was telling her about this topic. I feel like when you have a band like Black Sabbath or, you know, Led Zeppelin, any band, there was a certain magic that happened with these bands and these albums.
Yes.
What these newer bands are trying to do is recreate or kind of like harness the magic, but they didn't have anything prior to it to be able to harness it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, yeah, I could probably try my damnedest to make a beef Wellington too. But I guarantee if Gordon Ramsay walked up and I followed his instructions, about 100%, he's going to walk in and go, "What is this piece of shit?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
I mean, let's
You're
be
just
real.
missing that.
There's that thing. There's that X factor or whatever that these bands just don't have. Like,
Yes.
yeah, Greta Van Fleet, their songs, they have good hooks,
Yes.
whatever. But at the end of the day, if I'm sitting there, I'm going to go, okay, well, They all rather just listen to House is the Holy.
And that's what I'm saying. I appreciate the efforts in bands that are trying to, because even when we talked about that 90s movement, you had bands like Tad, the Melvins, Mudhoney, all kind of like dancing around this similar idea of alternative music.
Yes.
And every band, though, in a level had a unique value to it. Like, I listened to Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Mudhoney. I listened to all those bands totally differently.
Yeah.
For totally different reasons, and listen for a totally different purpose in the sense of like what I'm getting back from that music.
Exactly.
But I'm saying it's crazy because you do have a band like Greta Van Fleet and even some of the newer artists that have come out today. Like Black Keys was another one. Black Keys really try to build on that like later wave of the 90s alternative movement, like Modest Mouse and all those more alt bands, and create this indie rock sound. And it's just, it failed after a while, in my opinion. Like, it just doesn't do it for me in the same way that, yes, you're trying to redo and keep a value of, like, music alive.
I think it was right after El Camino.
Yeah.
That's when it went down.
Yeah.
Right after they hit their peak.
Yeah.
It was just like...
Lumineers were the same way. Of Monsters and Men did the same exact shit.
God damn it. Mumford and Sons.
Mumford and Sons.
Same exact thing. They're not even the same type of band anymore.
I know. And this is where even like the hip hop scene, man, like this is where I always say a lot of the new music I listen to is coming out by artists that have already been around. Like shit, look at like most of my recommendations. Carcass's new album.
Yeah.
You know, Iron Maiden's new album that's coming out. You know, Nas's new album that's coming out. Exodus, shit, like we didn't really talk about that, but Exodus is coming out with a new album, which is a thrash album, that the band that's been around since the 80s. And that's where I kind of get on the realm where there's only so many genres. Like I think the thrash genre in particular, like when you had bands like Warbringer, Municipal Waste, Skeleton Witch, that were keeping this level of like old school thrash with older tendencies without just, you know what I mean? Like why would I listen to your fucking band if I already like a band that's A, B similar with, you know what I mean? That's that much better.
Like if you're trying to be this band, why would I waste my time listening
That's
to
what
what
I'm saying.
you have to do?
And and like you've already put yourself in a position where you have to be that much better in a sense to really grab my attention. Because I'll listen to Led Zeppelin. You could sound just like Led Zeppelin. I love Led Zeppelin, but there's just like, I don't know what it is to me that immediately I'm like, it's just not.
You know, it was funny too. One of the first things I thought of when I heard Greta Van Fleet was, when are we going to get a Black Sabbath band?
Yeah.
Like, when are we going to get a band that sounds just like Black Sabbath?
Yeah.
Because it's going to happen.
I mean, honestly, Greenlung's pretty close.
Yeah.
Because his voice is very close to that early, self-titled Sabbath era.
Going back to the whole, if you're so similar, why listen to you? Kind of wants to, well, the inner tween in me, the inner tween girl, wants to bring out the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and all those other bands. I mean, because technically, if you want to be serious, this is actually kind of where I kind of want to make my point with this. It gets to a point where it's not about the music anymore. It's about the commercial value of it.
Yes.
Those bands like NSYNC and Backstreet Boys, 98 Degrees. I mean, granted, 98 Degrees was like it was a copy of them and just not as successful. Like Nick Lachey.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
At the end of the day, they were just carbon copies of New Kids on the Block.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to be real about it, New Kids on the Block were really the originators of the whole boy band thing.
Yeah.
I mean, then again, I guess maybe.
I mean, you can go Jackson 5.
Yeah, there's like a whole like train here. So like the Jackson 5 were the originators. I think I would like to say they were the originators. Then, you know, you had various groups, and then the next biggest one you had was New Edition. Then from New Edition, you had New Kids on the Block. Then you had Backstreet Boys, NSYNC.
Which is almost the concept as well of what we discussed with like the Beatles, for instance. The Beatles in this case being the Jackson 5, and more along the lines of like, they could be even like the Mudhoney, where Backstreet Boys were like the Nirvana of it, where they took boy bands to like a global phenomenon.
Because whether or not you like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys is kind of a moot point, because Backstreet Boys came first anyway.
But let me ask you this, though. Because what you just described is like kind of putting against the idea that you can be successful in a sense of like just recreating what's already been done, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is my opinion as well, do you think that genre determines the availability to be able to redo something completely and just make it a little bit different and better.
Yeah, because I feel like with rock music, it's a little bit harder.
Yes.
Because if it were that easy, we would have had 5 Led Zeppelin sound-alike bands between now and like 1975.
Yeah.
I feel like with pop music, it's extremely easy because it's all commercial. It's popular music.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. How many female artists have you heard that sound just like fucking Katy Perry in the past 10 years?
Oh, yeah.
How many male artists have you heard in the past 10 years that sound like Usher?
Yeah.
I mean,
shit, how many rappers have I heard that sound like Migos or fucking Lil
Drake?
Uzi Vert? Yeah, and all those
Lil
guys.
Wayne?
Yeah, dude. It's and that was another thing too, because I discussed this with you similarly. Like Olivia Rodrigo is all of a sudden blowing up as this artist, and luckily I see a lot of social media posts and the understanding of like the complete relation it is to like Paramore.
Yeah,
because Paramore, we talk about female artists, like that was a sound of like that growing emo scene and that pop punk scene where it was like new, it was fresh, and people could really do whatever they want. You had hundreds of bands that sound like every pop punk band to me. Like, granted, it's just like listening to 10 different artists, but you're just getting a huge discography by one artist. Like, there's so many pop punk bands out there sound exactly the fucking same. The same whiny voice, the same fucking harmony leads.
Yep.
And, you know, but it's funny because I heard this Olivia Rodrigo song. I didn't know what the fuck it was. And everyone was like talking about this girl and being like, we already had My Chemical Romance. We already had the emo fate. And I'm like, oh, so I guess this girl's comparable to that. Dude, as soon as I heard that song, I heard Misery Business by Paramore immediately. But then that's the thing, like you said, that's successful and can be unique to some because of the scene that it's in.
Exactly.
But like I said, this Greta Van Fleet shit, it's weirder because it falls in a category of individuals of like the elitist culture and like purists.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, granted, I'm one of them because I fucking get this person that keeps trying to get me into Greta Van Fleet. I'm like I fucking tried.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I have absolutely tried, but I don't know, man. I really think music, something has to happen in the next so many years to really define something because we're becoming so fucking stagnant, repetitive,
it's just cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Like everything is exactly the same.
and our favorite artists are fucking dying. So there's going to be like a matter of time before there is no more. It's just all 30th anniversary of this and expanded version of this, and we're just like, please.
53 tracks from one of these these newer artists that you
God.
covering the same song 4 times on this
speaking
album.
of fucking cover albums.
Yeah.
No, we need to discuss that 2 weeks in a row.
And not that I want to turn this into a discussion of this particular band, but they, in their earlier couple albums, they were rip-offs of other things too.
Well, but that's the thing. This is where the same Black Sabbath concept comes in, where you're able to grow, because you think about Diamond Head, and you think about Anvil, and you think about Budgie and all these other bands that kind of were like right there.
Yeah.
Like just missing something. And then obviously that hair metal movement was going on simultaneously, where Metallica was able to take the stepping stones of all that shit and like merge it into something more unique. That's where it's like you can find that tasteful value of it, because like I said, the thrash genre to me is like perfect, because every band is like almost solely dependent on your fucking tone of your instruments and the vocalist.
Pretty much.
I fucking Power Trip that I'm so hung up on. I mean, they're not so fucking far off from like Sepultura's early days or Demolition Hammer or like, all these earlier thrash bands.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like the tone, the songs, and you can do so much more in like certain subgenres.
Yeah.
But when you're trying to be like a grandstand rock band, you're trying to be like Madison Square Garden headlining Mumford and Sons type artist, you gotta I don't know. I think there needs to be some level of like integrity for the music, because in the 70s and the 80s and even in the 90s, like you saw there was constant consistency with artists. Like Alice in Chains, their whole career. Nirvana cut short their whole career. Even Soundgarden. Pearl Jam's had its fucking, you know what I mean? But you saw the progression.
Yeah, exactly. No, I know
you know what I mean? And that, I think artists, the way they are today, it's like you said, it's way more about the imagery and the marketing and
that's at the end of the day, that's all it is.
It's fucking sad, man.
And you know what's funny too, like even going into hip hop, I mean, I can't personally pick out individual artists, but I know I've heard other rappers that have ripped Eminem's game.
100%.
100%. I think the one band. I think the one rapper is his name's Token, and he's just like this like TikTok rapper or whatever. And my wife downloaded a couple of the songs on Spotify, and I'm listening to it. It's like this fucking dude is literally just a carbon copy ripoff of Eminem.
And this is where it can become frustrating because then people get popular in a sense, and it's just like I guess it's because of again that elitist like purist mentality. But when I'm trying to show somebody like something or talk music and they show me an artist, I'm like, oh, they sound like Eminem. And they're like confused as to who I'm talking to. And I'm using that in a very dramatic sense because most people know who Eminem is. But I've had many moments like that where they say, oh shit, like, are they a so-and-so cover band? They're like, I don't know that band.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but they're literally covering the song. You know what I mean? It's just, that's what's scary because I think that's what's important and what's missing in new music is that a lot of these younger artists aren't blueprinting so much, but just absorbing and then recreating exactly what's already been done.
Yep.
And getting fucking successful off it, which bothers me because I wish I could just fucking do that.
Yeah,
honestly,
exactly.
That would be cool if you can just make yourself self-made real quick just by totally ripping off what's been done. But like, again, like you said, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, all these bands didn't really have so much to go on to like invent a genre of music.
Exactly.
It's terrible.
And like I said, it's like I always say, music is up to interpretation. But when you are literally taking a whole band's sound and everything, literally to the fucking T.
The vocals for Greta Van Fleet, like, how are you not sitting there like?
I think that
a little bit like
I heard
Robert
like
Plant.
an interview with Robert Plant or something. They asked him about him. He's like, I never listened to him. Then like they play like a quick like clip of I think Highway Song or something. He's like, I think I've heard that voice before. I was like, you think?
Bro, when I heard that song, I'm telling you right now, it was like, what was this, like B-sides?
I literally thought it was a Led Zeppelin song.
I couldn't believe it, but the recording was so polished, so I was like,
Remastered.
It's pretty good remastered, to be honest with you.
Who's the producer on this?
I don't know. I guess like we're bigots in the music industry of just kind of how we talk things, but yeah, I really just like, I mean, even like Foo Fighters, I mean, just constantly, and like they're more individual in a sense, but they just literally branched off.
Well, they're chameleons, dude. You could throw them into any situation,
and that's which is terrible,
and they would be able to like cope with it.
Yeah, this is why I guess because a lot of things are based in terms on success, where you chart, how your album sold, things like that. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to be out there kind of having some sort of integrity to the art that you're producing, like at least understand that you're doing something for a fan base as opposed to like, you know, let's get successful off of this formula. Mm-hmm. You know, like what did you, like I would love if you could just get into the inner minds of some artists that if at the end of the day they were really passionate about what they were doing or they were like, we can fucking do this and be successful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I guarantee
really
you
what it is now.
I know. I can guarantee you there are so many artists up there that could give a fuck about their fans that show up and like, you know, don't like little press releases like I love my fans, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, all they're worried about is the numbers. What's selling, what we need to do, listening to some fucking ghostwriter, record producer on what'll work, and they could give a shit as long as it's gonna fucking chart.
Exactly.
Which is disturbing.
As long as they're gonna have, you know, the 30,000 plus 30,000 my wrists. 100,000 plus 100,000 my whip.
It's so bad, dude.
I mean, you know, occasionally you do get the few that kind of like transcend past it, but
then you get artists like Motorhead.
Yeah.
Like fucking Lemmy just
he didn't give a fuck.
Did whatever and he just kept going.
He literally just did what he wanted.
The guy had cancer and lied to people and kept doing meth and drinking and just didn't like just kept playing shows like and it was the same formula, it was the same music. Granted, it was basically AC/DC for metal kids.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there was like a level of integrity.
He built an empire on it.
I heard a story, and this is what made me think, and this is a totally different genre topic of media. It's for Seinfeld. I'm a huge Seinfeld fan. And towards the end of the career, Seinfeld, Jerry was asked to pick up a new season, even though he felt like the show was completed, and they were offering him $1 million per episode.
Damn.
And he denied it. He denied it. Because he felt like the show was complete, like a level of integrity for your fucking art.
Yeah.
Like that shit to me, in hindsight, you could say like, all right, he's an idiot because he was creating a show and it's a lot of fucking money. But that's the thing as an artist, like at some point, I guess you have to assume like you felt like you've done enough. And
Yeah.
at some point, you're just making and creating shit to keep your status quo.
Yeah.
To keep, like, but you're burnt out. Like, people sometimes burn out.
Well, that's like Chappelle.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, that was a different situation.
Yeah,
but,
he would, but now he's doing stand-up. Like, that's the thing. Like, even Jerry did the same thing. He went on to do other parts that he wanted to pursue in his career.
Yeah. Now he's got comedians in cars getting coffee, which is actually a pretty decent
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's, you know, the integrity of your art sometimes has to be more valuable than the paycheck for your art.
Yep.
Is what I feel like is absolutely necessary. And you could fucking make that the title of this goddamn episode. That was pretty dope how that came up. Yeah, little JFK. The integrity of your art must be more important than the paycheck for your art. But seriously, man, because I always think like we can only say it from a perspective of like aspiring to have that level of success.
Yep.
So no way can I knock the ability to do what almost every artist is able to achieve that has that level of fame.
Yeah.
You know, at some point they were just some kid in a garage or just sitting at home on their computer and made something. And next thing you know, it's on the radio and people are listening to it and people are singing it at concerts with you. Fucking great. That's like everyone's dream that loves that, you know, field of music, whatever they wanted to do or art. But at the same time, like I said, I don't know. I guess maybe something changes in you when you're sitting there and you've released 3 albums and you just like don't have it anymore, or you just want to tour, you want to pursue something else, but then a record company comes in, we'll give you $80 million to do another album.
Yeah.
And even though you got nothing fucking written, no like sense of creativity towards your art anymore in that realm, and you just do something.
Yeah.
Like, scary.
Yeah.
It's fucking scary.
So what do you think?
Do you also need a consultation?
If you're looking for a consultation, you're looking for new ideas for your podcast, your television network, your movie, your soundtracks, you can find us on social media, facebook.com/RATM podcast, Instagram and Twitter @RATM podcast. And our email is always open at ratmpodcast@gmail.com. Also, you can find us on YouTube. Just type in the search bar, Rage Against the Mainstream Podcast. That concludes this topic for this week. So what do you think? Do you think we're way too harsh on Greta Van Fleet? Do you feel like, I don't know, do you feel like the elitist culture is kind of ruining these newer bands that are coming out that sound just like bands that they're trying to imitate? They say imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, but I consider that to be a lawsuit.
Led Zeppelin also had to face similar consequences.
Exactly.
Nobody's immune to the lawsuit. Not even us.
Yeah, exactly.
Cease and desist orders.
I'm waiting for like Eddie Trunk to just like knock on my door, be like, "Hey, so kind of stole the idea from hey, I listened to your show. It sounds a little familiar."
Yep. Yep.
But regardless, that concludes the topic for this week. We're gonna get into our suggestions. Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So the album I'm going to recommend is LAMF. It stands for Like a Motherfucker. It is the Lost 77 recordings by Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers.
Okay.
Yeah, Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers, if you're familiar with like the early punk scene in the New York area of like the New York Dolls and stuff like that. Johnny Thunders was a very, very good artist, but with the Heartbreakers, they released this album, which was basically a compilation of their 77 recordings. The song I'm going to recommend is track 6 called Chinese Rocks.
Nice. My suggestion for this week is based off of my new and interesting for this week. To check out the 1983 smash fucking album, Sports by Huey Lewis and the News.
Choice.
Now, there's quite a few songs on this album that were super mega hits, and of course I had to choose one of those. But I picked the lowest of the super mega hits, Heart and Soul. It's got such a good fucking hook.
It is. Dude.
It's just like it's just
bottom
there.
line, man. Like
Heart and Soul.
It's just think of one of those
you know?
artists. Like you just have to know them.
Yeah.
This is where I hope. This is again when I go back to the TikTok thing, when you see like a wave of a certain classic rock song or just even just a classic R&B song of any sort, hip hop especially. It's great when you have those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, if your only like introduction to Huey Lewis and the News is Back to the Future, I guarantee you that you'll enjoy way more of their songs than just that.
Yes.
for the horror movie fans out there that watched American Psycho and heard "Hip to Be a Square,"
Yeah.
like there's way more than just that too, and it's funny too because even they're a band that has like major R&B influences and like blues rock and all that other shit, but they took those influences and went in a totally different direction,
Yes.
and they basically made like a genre of their own.
That's what I was gonna say. They're another one of those like artists. Like when you hear them, especially if you've already heard,
it's them.
You know it's them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
There's
they have a
no
very unique sound.
There's no question about it.
Yep.
Honestly, it's kind of funny too because if I would have heard Huey Lewis in the News before I heard Van Halen, I probably would have been a saxophone player as opposed to a guitar player. Because I was already on that trajectory path. Like I was playing saxophone. My parents were like, "This is what you're going to do. Bill Clinton plays saxophone. Everything's gonna be great." And then I heard Eruption and heard Van Halen 1
Changed
for the
that
first
whole
time, and
trajectory.
then I saw a Van Halen video, and I was like in my 10-year-old head, or 12, 15, something like that. I was young, and I remember just thinking like, this guy's way cooler than the guy in fucking Bruce Springsteen or George Thorogood's band. But if I would have heard, Huey Lewis and got into it, I probably would have stayed on that path of playing saxophone.
Oh my God. See, I honestly wish I would have heard Jethro Tull at an earlier age and got on to Ian Anderson with his fucking extreme flute playing.
Yeah.
That would have been badass, wearing like a leather jacket and Doc Martens and just
Could you
having a
imagine
flute
like
in my
how
fucking inside pocket.
different our lives would have been like?
Yo, what do you play, bro? Play sax.
Yeah.
Yeah. Check this out. Pull out a flute out of my pull out a fucking flute out of the inside of my
Yeah, it
leather.
would be this way.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
However, I'll never forget there was one particular instance. I was in 6th grade, and I had like manipulated a piece of music that we were playing in band, and the band instructor or the teacher or whatever, he was like, "Oh, you're gonna play this at the next concert by yourself." Because I manipulated this piece of music, and I'll never forget it, dude, because I can remember it like it was yesterday. I'm fucking sitting there in front of everybody, and the whole everyone's families and all that other shit's there, and I'm playing this piece of music, and or when I go to sit down, my fucking teacher comes walking past me with a fucking Les Paul Custom. And he came behind me, and he was just playing some he was a really good guitar player too, but I knew nothing about guitar at that point. He was playing some jazzy shit behind what I was playing, and you can see it in the video. If I can find it, I'll post it on fucking YouTube or some shit so everyone can see. There's a point in time where he walks past me with a guitar, and I'm just like,
And that was the moment.
that was the moment. He had a fucking cherry. It was like a wine cherry Les Paul Custom.
They have a pick guard?
Yes.
Picturing a white
No,
one.
no, it didn't have a pick guard at all.
Oh, it was just, okay.
Yeah, he had a wine. It was a wine cherry red Les Paul Custom, and I remember looking at that as a kid, this is cool.
This is it.
And then I saw the Van Halen stripes.
I always wish that I played the piccolo or some weird instrument. So when I said, yeah, I listen to music. Are you playing instruments? Yeah, and they're expecting guitar, drums, bass.
Yeah, like a normal.
I have a baritone.
I play the oboe.
Yeah, yeah.
I play the tuba.
Yeah, just something not traditional at all.
Do you play an untraditional instrument?
If you play the harp, I would love to hear it.
Oh, dude, could you imagine that being the intro?
Harp player, yeah.
Just
that was what we can do. We can have a contest for our recording our intro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? We're going to set this up towards the end of this season.
Absolutely.
Here. Nice.
Be our intro will be the fucking episode.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like
I don't
this.
even care what it fucking sounds like. It could be farting armpits.
Hey,
We'll give you a shout out.
Exactly. We're going to backburn this because this is going to happen.
Yeah, I know. This is just the opening segue to it.
Yeah.
It would be recurring.
This
session.
will happen.
Yep.
So, yeah, I guess that about wraps it up for this week. Yeah, if you play any strange instruments, don't forget to find us on our social media accounts, facebook.com/RATM podcast, Instagram and Twitter @RATM podcast, or you can send us a video or, a letter or email or whatever to ratmpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube search Rage Against the Mainstream podcast. Don't forget to check out this Friday where I sit down with Juan from 54 Reasons. And yeah, that's about it. So that about wraps it up for this week. This is another episode of Rage Against the Mainstream podcast for the books. As always, I'm Bill.
Steve.
Have a good night, guys. Thank you for listening.